Okay, three, two, one. Ah! Hi, I'm Kai. We're gonna talk about movies. Hello.
Matt, and I'm also going to talk about movies.
And specifically, this time, we watched the Blade Runner duology. First one directed
Both of them,
by,
yes.
yeah, by Ridley Scott, and the second
And the
one
second one
by
directed
Denis
by,
Villeneuve.
yes,
And
both like 30 years apart, and so it's like a legacy sequel.
yeah, a little bit. Very,
Yeah.
yeah. So first, we'll do each of them separately, and we're probably gonna end up talking about um, Blade Runner more when we get into 2049. But a lot of funky stuff going on. They're both pretty. I think they neither of them did too well when they came out. They're
They
very
did not
well,
do well at
yeah,
all financially when they came out. The first one bombed hard,
which is
but
unfortunate.
it got a cult following after a while. It got a very big cult following after a while, and a lot of people say it's like one of the most influential sci-fi movies ever made. But it did take a while for it to get that influential.
Yeah, you can feel a lot of that too because I saw this way after we both saw it very recently, like in the past week. So we've
Yeah.
obviously both seen a lot of stuff inspired by it after we've seen it, and it's definitely a really interesting world. Just going right into the first one first, I'd say that's probably the main draw of it for me at least is just the world they're creating and like the set design, how it's portrayed, the VFX in both movies to an extent. It's really pretty at parts, pretty icky in some ways. It's fun. It's a good setting. I like it. What are you thinking?
Yeah, that's the main thing about these two movies. I would completely agree. I think both Ridley Scott and later Denis Villeneuve would really master like the true atmosphere of this world, how kind of like how it feels so big, so dense, so like compressed at times, but so large, and how there's so many things that are happening at the same time. But also you feel like the human race has evolved so much in such a unique way, and where it's become really intertwined with itself, and it's just really, really interesting. And yeah, I think both directors do a great job of exploring that world. And I would even say the setup for the story is a really, really interesting one. It's like, should we go into the like just kind of summarize the background quickly? But ultimate
Well, I
like
mean, conceptual again. Okay, so briefly, the concept for those unaware of both of these movies is basically set in. Okay, well, it was first one was from 1982,
it's
so
set
by
in
the few,
modern day
yeah. So
technically.
technically, but no, like a kind of dystopian world where replicants or artificial people are used as like slave labor and all that stuff, and it kind of explores a lot of themes surrounding like what makes people people, free will, that kind of concept. And
Also the exploration of like humans and how they get to such a level where they're able to create their own life, and
yeah,
how that itself scares them, and how they have to kind of create a whole like hunter type like job known as a Blade Runner as the movie,
yeah,
where they hunt down those replicants or retire them as they like to say.
which is freaky in and of itself. Yeah, so both movies
Yeah.
follow a quote unquote Blade Runner. Um, into general thoughts. So for the first one, I liked it a lot, actually, more than I was expecting, because originally we had planned to the main discussion. Like hear about 2049 way more just in like passing, or when people talk about either of these movies, it's usually 2049 and glazing it. So I was mostly watching Blade Runner to get to that. I did not realize how interesting I would find it in its own right. And I didn't realize just how really different these two movies are. And I really like what Blade Runner 1 is going for. So what are you on with that?
Um, I had a similar setup for you. I heard a lot more about Blade Runner 2049. And unlike Kai right here, I'm a very, very big fan of the director, Denis Villeneuve. He has made some really iconic movies that really kind of make him stand out. In my opinion, he's one of my favorite directors working right now, modern day, mainly because of how he directs atmosphere. And I feel like for a Blade Runner movie, that is really the perfect choice. That is really the perfect guy. So when it came to Blade Runner, all I heard was him. And once again, similar to you, Kai, I realized it was also a sequel, and I just had to kind of watch this older like Blade Runner movie with directed by Ridley Scott with Harrison Ford to kind of just get the background I needed. So that's what I kind of felt going in. And I will say there were parts that really did intrigue me. Once again, the world building and the world in general really did intrigue me. The setup and like how we really understand the differences between the replicants and the humans and kind of the role of the bounty hunter a little bit and how that whole dichotomy like influences the whole world that they live in. But ultimately, I found it a little bit underwhelming. Like there were also corny at times. Like I get that certain aspects of it, but like particularly the villains we'll get into later. But I found like a little bit too corny. I know they're trying to find emotion, but I just felt like it was a little bit too shaky for me and very disjointed. And it just didn't work entirely for me, and I actually felt a little bored at parts. So, yeah, but once again, the world itself and the atmosphere is very engaging, and it is very interesting. I just feel like it trips on a lot of things at first that kind of ruined my experience a little bit more.
Hmm. Okay, so before we get into spoilers, feel the need to mention something here. Me and Matt did not see the same movie in the sense that
Wait,
this
did you watch
movie
the director's cut at
I
all?
did, I did. But
Okay.
first, the first version that I watched was the theatrical cut. Okay, I saw the final cut actually, which does have like some slight differences from the director's cut,
I
mainly
think
just
that's
in
not
like
problem.
visually, just like clarity wise, but
Yeah.
basically yeah. But I originally saw the theatrical cut while Matt saw the director's cut. So I have mostly not seen I have not been exposed to, or at least like recently, been exposed to that many movies from this kind of time period, meaning a lot of these movies have very different. The version that people saw in theaters when they came out is not the movie that the directors envisioned, and this was way more common at the time that to like this insane degree probably than it is now. It's still an issue now, obviously, with studio
It's
interference,
still a
but
problem now, honestly.
this is a very funny case to me where I seriously do not think that the movie that I was exposed to first was like the right one. I thought that I kind of saw bastardization a little bit, mainly due to the inclusion of this plastered on half-assed narration from Harrison Ford in the theatrical version that's not present in the director's cut or the later released final cut from Ridley Scott. And it kills it a little bit for me. I really, it was really obnoxious throughout. I thought we'll get into it more, but I liked how stuff was left up to interpretation, or at least it was portrayed pretty subtle. Like a certain elements about the plot and just thematically were definitely more subtle in this original movie. Not as much in the stupid ass director's cut, because in this version of it, Harrison Ford will look you dead in the eye, acting well, and out of the blue, you'll hear this super abrupt, obnoxious, pretty lazy in terms of the delivery narration explaining some element of the plot that to someone was unclear, explaining what he's feeling right then. And I do not think it fits. I find it really obnoxious, and it definitely murked it a little bit for me. So, to anyone who kind of, based on what we're saying already, or after this, we get more into it, wants to watch it, for the love of all things holy, do not watch the theatrical version of this movie if you want kind of the director's more original, purified version of it, or if you just want something that's more tonally and like narratively cohesive, because it's a stinker. The theatrical version's a bit of a stinker for sure.
Yeah, I thought I was watching the theatrical version at first. Like I just kind of randomly
Lucky.
chose on Prime, and I was just like, okay, I think I'm watching the theatrical version, but I realized I wasn't. I like soon. Actually, today I only realized I didn't watch it, which is kind of a shock for me because I heard like the theatrical version wasn't that good, and I did watch parts of the theatrical version before like this. And yeah, I did hear the podcast, and it's just really funny. Like, it's just really funny, his recording voice. He is not trying at all. And there's actually like a funny story where they did a test screening before, for the movie when they released, and too many people were just confused and had no idea what was going on. So like when Ridley was out directing another movie, they just brought Harrison Ford back in and had this completely different screenwriter like have him write another script, like write like different parts for Harrison Ford, and Harrison Ford hated it and just recorded these sessions as like a joke and like trying to act in a very very bad way to kind of piss the writer off. And they had no time, so they just kept what they had and literally just put it in the movie. So it's kind of funny thinking about that. Like that's just Harrison Ford trying to piss the new writer off in the theatrical version. But in the director's cut, I didn't really hear that much of it. There was none of it at all. So yeah, that's the one at least I watched, and I do think it's a better, probably a better version because it is the director's full vision. And yeah, that's kind of my background on watching the different versions.
Yeah, it's very fascinating to just see because in this instance, this is, I mean, there are other elements of it that were changed, which we'll get into later, but seeing how, because I think part of it probably has to do with the audience of this movie, which is this movie is, I think it's probably a little too subtle in its presentation and what it's trying to do relative to what the audience might have anticipated from it. Let me Google when a certain other movie came out to get some reference here. Because, yeah, so Star Wars would have released 5 years previous to this. I think that when
Oh,
people
earlier,
at the time, hold on, 1977?
yeah, actually, you're right.
So yeah, so I think audiences at the
This is
time
82.
when they think of sci-fi movie with bounty hunter, that maybe they would have interpreted, but like cop guy fighting these robots. I don't know if they would have came in with the expectation of it being as artsy as it was or as vague as it was in some regards. So I'm not surprised that about the reception, about the test audiences, and about kind of the feedback that was given there. It is unfortunate because in trying to mold it into kind of that version of it that it was not trying to be, it was not even in the slightest trying to be originally. It definitely shot it dead a little bit. It was not a great call, and I think but the kind of fact that these movies are going for this kind of ambitious world and this fun sci-fi premise, I think in both of them probably got more audiences than, or like more normie audiences than were warranted by what the movie is going for. Because I think both movies are definitely trying to do something more ambitious than what a lot of general audiences are going into it expecting and hoping for. And I think that might have impacted both, again, the profits of them, but also just the general interpretations of them. Because as we'll get into later, I think that there might be some strange tomfoolery happening here in terms of some discrepancies between the audience kind of wider interpretation of these movies and what was originally intended. It's a funky situation, and it's weird. It's not great, but yeah, just in terms of how these have been treated, given, in my opinion, how kind of excellent both of them are to me. It's not. It's weird.
I guess um I kind of have to disagree a little bit. Like if you're gonna make a world like really rich and interesting and deep, there are plenty of like very fascinating genres that do it. Like Star Wars, like there's the Batman franchise, there's Dune, there's
Okay.
Harry Potter, there's Lord of the Rings, there's Game of Thrones, there's Westeros. All of these are very, very rich, detailed lore with so much talking about them. There's so much to their worlds. There's so much interesting characters, interesting relationships, and interesting dichotomies that make up their world and it really captivate the audience. So I honestly don't think it's even the how deep it is. I do find the problem with just how utterly vague it leaves so many things, and I do like that for certain aspects, like kind of dropping the audience in a world that they don't fully recognize. But you do need to like kind of have a big like important thing at stake, and I feel like they didn't really have that, at least in the first movie, at least at the very beginning where they're kind of setting up the world. For me, I would say
What?
honestly one of the biggest problems for me for the first movie at least, the second movie does it a little bit better, is that they do emphasize the fact that that the main character Blade Runner, the main of the title of the movie, is a bounty hunter. He quote unquote retires replicants,
Well, the
but
job is
that's
to
his
be a
job.
cop. Yeah, yeah. Like that's not like
But
he's
no, to
picking up a
retire at exactly,
like
but still ultimately they do mention that he is a hunter. So,
a hunter. Yeah,
and I feel like they don't really show that much. He kills like I think two people in the whole movie, and not and like he only really fully kills one. He's not very good at it. Like he kind of runs around like trying to shoot.
Okay, well, we'll
I
we'll
think
get into
like
spoiler like more plot stuff in a minute, but
yeah,
for
but like I think that's the whole idea. That's my whole problem with him. But like I do kind of want to touch about a point you mentioned, which was that like audiences weren't kind of didn't exactly like it for like the deep like world or like the deep how vague it is. I do have to disagree a little bit because one of the most recent examples of how a deep and rich world that nobody thought could be properly adapted to the big screen is like and made a lot was very successful with both critics and audiences and also made a lot of money were the Dune movies, and ironically they were made by Denis Villeneuve, the guy who made Blade Runner, and those were very deep rich worlds that nobody really thought could be done on the big screen and could entertain the big audience, and yet they did it. So I do feel like there's more problems in the Blade Runner, at least the first Blade Runner movie for me than feel like you're kind of willing to give it credit because you do need to make your world a little bit more clear and not completely vague, even if
I
it's
don't think it
for the
was complete.
story.
I again, I okay. I think where I differ here is that I'm not comparing it to something like Star Wars or Harry Potter because I don't think
No,
they're going for the
I've used
same
the
thing.
comparison of I used the comparison of Dune because like it's more of
That
a it's
again,
a sci-fi
the
rich
reason
world.
just to preface, I'm. It's not that I'm not a the Denis Villeneuve fan. It's that I haven't seen his other movies. Just because this is
Yeah,
the
fair.
first 2049 would be the first movie I've seen of him. I didn't tap into Dune because I didn't care. I heard they were long. I had other things to do at the time. We might get to them in the future at some point, but that because of that, I don't have that frame of reference. But for these movies specifically, I think I'd more so say that I think the world that they're presenting, the purpose of it is to elevate and to communicate the story. I think that's the focus, and to present the tone they want, to present the characters they want, the themes that they want to communicate, that kind of thing. I think that is the priority over the world in and of itself, and so or even like the plot by itself. So I don't mind those things being more vague, and we'll get to the specific reason for some of those things and why I think some of them. I think the open-endedness of them might have been a bit exaggerated by some people, but I don't mind that because I frankly just don't think that's what either of these filmmakers are going for. Is for this like big thing where you get to know everything, you see all the lore, and you understand. You can that kind of vibe. I don't think that's what it was going for. I think that's what some audiences might have wanted or anticipated, just given it being like a big sci-fi like blockbuster like that kind of thing. I think that the expectation did not fit the intention, and I think that is the unfortunate reality of it. That I don't think is a fault of either of the movies by themselves. I think that's just more of an unfortunate reality of the concept of them, where I just think they're a bit more ambitious than what was anticipated of them. But to go into more details, we can start going into spoilers for Blade Runner 1. So if you have not seen it, has my recommendation. So if you're curious based on what we said, check it out. Definitely not the theatrical cut for the love of God. Avoid it at all costs. But or
Yeah,
maybe if you
that
want to find it funny after you watch.
unless you want to have a good laugh,
Yeah,
unless you want to have a good laugh,
or or
it's genuinely
or
kind of
maybe
funny.
frown a little bit because it's unfortunate.
It's just
but,
funny.
but okay, well we'll get into spoiler talk now to get into the meat of it because I know that there are also some things that you weren't sure on and also some differences between the two cuts that you weren't privy to. So we could get into how that might have affected things a bit
I'll
here.
say I would say the director's cut is better because like the I didn't watch the entirety of the theatrical cut, but
Oh
based
yeah,
on what
duh.
I heard and based on
100%.
what I needed to know, like the director's cut was his full vision. So I think I that's all I needed. But yeah,
Yeah, I don't think they're the theatrical cut is a.
yeah. Once again, there was
It's
a
just a thing
final
that
cut,
happened.
but like it didn't add too much.
No, it's not. It's I don't I No, I wouldn't. I mean, I recommend the Final Cut probably just because I think visually it's a bit more up to snuff. But yeah, no, if you have access to the director's cut, then there you go. But getting into the actual meat and potatoes here, I when I was watching through it, like mid movie, I felt the confusion and kind of how certain things felt like they were being kind of hid or weren't being fully explored. I think after I've seen it, I think that it kind of tells you everything it needs to in order for you to come to the conclusion that I think was intended, or at least fits in line with what it seems to be going for thematically. And I do not mind what it hid as much or what it kept less clear because ultimately I think it fits what it's going for tonally and emotionally. I think that it putting you in this situation where you don't really know what's going on, you're a bit confused, you're trying to figure things out, you're kind of trying to put. I think it puts you into the shoes of Deckard very well and makes it way more engaging than it would have been otherwise. There are exceptions. There are definitely parts where I was like, uh, you can go, where it could have maybe the pacing was a little just weird, and I'm not convinced of why, but I thought otherwise. I was pretty interested throughout, and I really liked how much it kind of kept things up to interpretation. But I know you don't. You're not in that boat. So where are you with
I
this?
was, I'll say this. I was actually relatively invested in the first fifth or quarter of the movie, like when they once again introduced the concept and the reality, and once again going to spoilers, like the first couple scenes where they have the interview, with with the first replicant we
Leon, I
see,
think.
and
Yeah.
overall the whole process of like interviewing the replicants through a certain process and like really dissecting to see whether they have that true emotion of humans is really really interesting for me, and just the whole setup of the world, like that basic interview actually was the thing that I found the most interesting, really finding out how different they are and how humans have evolved to figure out the difference between them and the replicants. But once again, it just leaves things too vague. Once again, he's supposed to be a bounty hunter hunting these things down. And unlike other
Okay, no, hold
shows,
on, hold on. I gotta
like
feel
this
the need to
kind of like,
mention bounty hunter implies he's like picking up bounties that are put by like
no,
some other
okay, not
person,
bounty
like
hunter, but
a
like
cop, a cop,
his job is
to hunt them,
to
to hunt
kill
them.
these
Yeah,
things.
yeah, yeah.
His job is to hunt and kill these things because they're a problem. Because like if they get out of line, then they are a big problem. And really, he doesn't feel like number one a good at his job. Like he fails a lot of the time. And I'm fine having a flawed protagonist where you're not completely good at your job, but I at least expect him to be relatively capable. And he, at least on the physical perspective, like when he's actually hunting, doesn't completely see that way. If you have a scene in the movie that proves me wrong, then you can tell me. But like as far as I remember, he really wasn't up to the. He didn't feel like he was up to the job for me. Number one, and number two, just the replicants later on were just very very strange, and I get it. They're supposed to be not
You don't
entirely
say.
human, but but like I thought the whole point was that they're kind of exploring to be human. They felt a little, and as the movie went on, they went only crazier and crazier, and I felt like that kind of went against the idea. I was like, aren't they supposed to like be more human? That's the dichotomy, like that's the conflict that like these things are learning to be more and more human, and now and they're not really acting that way. I especially have a lot of problems with like I think what is the main villain. I forgot his name, but like the white haired guy who talks in a weird way. This
Roy, I
white
think.
haired British
Yeah.
dude. Yeah, I really didn't like him. He was way too over the top and way too corny. Like it was too much for me personally. But once again, I think the setup of the world and the general like ideas that they plant the seeds are really really interesting. Like there is a very interesting dichotomy, and how like I've seen this actually explore in a couple movies where humans try to play God, and usually God is the one that creates that creates creatures and creates species and creates something as profound and special as like another species in humans. And now that we're trying to play God and create our own, it ultimately backfires. They try to rebel against us. They try to like hurt us. They try to do all these crazy things. And I think that's actually really, really interesting. I actually really like stories like that. Like thinking the Planet of the Apes is the best example of that. But once again, this movie doesn't really. I don't feel like this movie doesn't really actually dig too deep into that.
Yeah, I don't
Aside
think
from
that's
like,
what it's saying. Like, at least
no,
that's
I think
not
it is
how
though.
I. I don't think that was what it was. Okay. I think that I think it was mostly trying to tackle, at least how I kind of viewed it and how I'm currently thinking over the decisions it made, is more specifically relating to the human condition. And free will, I thought, was more of a focus of it than that kind of wider. I think that the Plain Goth, I think in general, there are more kind of also just religious undertones, or that element of it is explored more in 2049, which we'll get into. And I actually found that really fun, and I'm still kind of trying to think about that now. I think in this first movie, okay, I will say, I thought that the acting in these movies in 2049, I think it's really exceptional. In this movie, some of
Yeah.
the performances are strange, and I
You
think
think?
I'm split between, because again, Ridley Scott's a very talented director. I think
Until now, in
I'm
my opinion.
I think I'm flip flopping between. I'm trying to. I always approach movies where I can see the intentionality and the decisions being made. When I can feel that clearly things are being done in order to communicate something specific, I will try to come to a conclusion about every aspect of said work where I am interpreting those things as decisions rather than fuck ups. So in this case, when, for example, Harrison Ford, his character Deckard, when he does act a little off sometimes, a little awkward, a little dejected, a little monotone, or even a little incompetent, I think that part of that might have been what Ridley Scott eventually would really openly kind of admit to, both in interviews and just kind of how he talks about the character, which is that I think the very strong, well, okay, frankly, according to him, what was the strong implication is that Deckard is also a replicant. And I think that
That's
that
still left a lot of that's still left pretty open to interpretation by a lot of fans, and like even in the 2049, it's still left pretty open in my opinion. So I don't
I'd
want to jump to that
I'm
immediately.
going to I'm gonna again I definitely look at both of these movies through that lens, due to again partially because I'll be frank, Ridley Scott said it a lot. If you look at interviews, he straight up says because Deckard's a replicant, or because Deckard's this model. Cause he very openly.
Ridley Scott with all behind the scenes says a lot of things, and like
I
especially
mean, it's
now
his
with his
movie.
like filmography, he didn't write it exactly in all fairness, but like
True.
once again he does like a lot of things like behind the scene. Like recently, I've not liked his movies at all or his work, like, but yeah, like don't always. He doesn't seem as like he doesn't seem as hands on the writing aspect as like other directors. I feel like a lot of time, mainly because like
Here,
I don't think he has that attitude, honestly.
well, I'd say that for this. Okay, so to get into specific,
Maybe this one because it's his earlier work, but I don't know.
I'll get into more specific aspects of it that kind of lead to this interpretation, because I have, and I'll get into why I do. I've seen the quote unquote fan reaction, at least in part, and I find it kind of fascinating. But I think that a big thing that seems, again, this was cut from the theatrical version, so I actually didn't see this originally. I didn't really. I was not confident. I thought it was like definitely hinting toward it, but I wasn't too confident in this interpretation until I saw the final cut. Because when I saw the theatrical cut, it removed something that is pretty key to this, which is the very short kind of vision or dream sequence of when Deckard is kind of like unconscious or dipping in and out of consciousness, like drunk, sitting on the piano, kind of fiddling with one key. That blip of a dream sequence of a unicorn running through,
Oh yeah,
and how because in the theatrical cut they keep in him picking up the like foil or paper origami unicorn made by the one guy, like the guy who like hired or picked him up in the car, that creepy looking guy. The
yeah, weird hat.
so that they kept in the unicorn in the theatrical cut, but they cut out the unicorn dream earlier, which I was like, which made it much harder to figure out the meaning behind this, but just purely plot wise. But I think that the strong implication from that is that the kind of guy who made that origami unicorn, he saw Deckard's memories because his memories were an implant. That's how he knew about the unicorn kind of vision or dream that he was having, because he saw it. And the only way he could have done that is if he was a replicant, because then his memories would be on file rather than just in his head. I think that that was, and this is also something that Ridley Scott's directly said to interviewers before, which I will say, as a rule of thumb, I don't really like when directors kind of spell out things like this. I I'm not gonna
Does
deny it when it
depending on the
happens.
context, I guess.
I would
But like,
I usually prefer when, and there are directors who like strictly say that for even in like Blu-rays of their movies, like in director commentary, they say that maybe sometimes some directors don't even record it just because they don't want to spell out what certain things were supposed to mean. They would rather, the point is for the audience to kind of interpret that. That's kind of the idea of the work in general. The subtlety of it is kind of lost if you're just going to explain it anyway. So I'm not sure how I feel about him being so upfront with this in interviews, but he is. So I'm not really going to ignore that because I think this is kind of a conclusion you could come to anyway. I don't really know how you would interpret the purpose of that scene and that decision otherwise. I don't really know what meaning you would glean from it. But because of that, and also
either
the,
it's just made very unclear.
I mean,
Like
again, it's not
even
obvious,
in the
but I wouldn't
director's
say it's
cut,
unclear. Again, I think you have to interpret it, but
so
I
there's interpret, but like there's it's a big, very, very big plot point if that's the case, and I would understand it. It's just like there's not enough. Like the movie's already focusing on a ton of other things, and like I feel like
I'd
that,
say
like
this
at
is the
least in
focus.
2049, it's like a legit question in 2049, and there it matters a little bit more. But like that's discussion for
I'd
later,
say
I
it's
guess.
the entire. I would say that it's completely central to the point of this movie. I cannot think of this movie interpretation wise
Him
with
being a
while
replicant.
ignoring. Yeah, no, I can't separate that from the story and wider themes of the movie. I can't at this point.
Actually, yeah,
Because even
I
on an
guess.
initial viewing
Fine.
before watching the director's cut, I initially the question. I think that kind of the entire time, just the processes that Deckard went through, the behavior he exhibited. I think it very much so begged the question of, for one, what separates him from the replicants? What separates any human from the replicants? And then specifically, how do you know? How do you know who's
Yeah.
really a replicant or not? And that's something that 2049 raises more. And I think that the movie kind of beckons you to an extent to think on how do you know, audience member? How can you be sure? And I think that that kind of transitions into the wider question that I think both movies are asking, which is what actually is the difference? Not just in terms of physically or where they came from, but who they actually are in the present, like as as people, as thinking beings. What is the difference between them? What actually separates them? And I think that gets to the core of what these movies are saying. And I think that assuming he is a replicant is more. I think that again, you could also glean this from the plot as it is, but I think him being a replicant makes it a lot more interesting conceptually and stronger thematically than if that wasn't the case in terms of what the movie is trying to say in that way.
Once again, I wouldn't fully agree for the first movie because not just that it doesn't give us that much to go off of, but because I feel like at least for the first movie, I feel like it doesn't really focus on that. It maybe does a little bit, maybe I didn't catch it, but like it doesn't focus on it that much. In the second movie, it does a lot more. Like it really does burn the question because we'll get to the second movie later, but like it really does make that a central full theme in the movie, and it really is more interesting there. I don't even my biggest problem with the first movie is I don't even know how to describe it. Like if I were to describe to a friend, I guess like a utopia, like a movie of like a utopian society, like not a utopian society, but like
A
where
dystopian
it's
little
a
bit, yeah.
futuristic movie, futuristic movie where like new creations, new inventions, and we're kind of battling with the human race. And like once again, the plot, like I get it, you're supposed to be subtle, and like I get subtlety, but you can't make things too unclear. And like once again, the like
Why
just
not?
the
I guess is what I'd posit.
because otherwise, once again, no one's gonna go see it, and number one, no one's gonna go see it. People will just be confused and won't even know what story you're actually trying to tell. You can deeper doesn't mean better.
Okay,
Just
so
because you have
mhm.
a good theme, just because you have an interesting theme and an idea, and you don't explore it at all, it's just there. You just have to look
I say it
very,
was
very, very,
explored. I'd
very
just say
deeply.
that you need to think about it, which is what the movie wanted you to do. So I don't see the issue. I think the movie
I
successfully
no,
does what it's
really.
trying to do. Yeah.
With one like half-second scene that's a dream. That's
No,
not
I'd
even the
say it's
focal
the
point of the
entire
movie.
premise of the movie. I'd say that I
For
think
the
that the
second movie,
premise
yes, but not
of
the
the
first movie.
no, I would say it's definitely still kind of also just between the main villains kind of monologue during his death scene, during his
I
character as a whole.
I
I
really didn't like the villain at all. He
I
He didn't make
found
any
his
sense to me.
performance hammy, but I didn't mind
Yeah,
what
same.
he was serving narratively. I thought he was fun. I will say, this goes into I think my biggest issue with the movie, and again, it's tricky because there might be some reason for things like this that I'm not privy to. That again, I've seen them recently. I might watch them again, especially this movie. There's a lot of stuff I want to think further on, but I don't know what the hell was going on with the frame rate during this death scene. Just in the sense that, like, when the kind of bird was flying up, like, it just kind of slowed to a crawl for a minute. Like, it just got really choppy. I don't really know what
Like
the point
slow
of that was.
motion or the actual
No, the
frame was
frame rate. No,
was
the
changing.
frame rate itself would just like dipped to like really low for a minute, and I just don't know why during like those few shots when he died. I don't know.
Some movies do that well, but other movies don't do it well.
It just
So
kind of took me out of it. Again, it's just a thing where I don't. It took me out of it, and I don't know why. It's choices like that where there might have been some motivation behind it. I don't know what, but it was weird. But I'm not.
yeah, I
There's a
guess.
few, little things like that are kind of when they add up, and I can think of numerous scenes where it's like, okay, I am thinking about this decision and I don't know why, and it's distracting. Is when I'm like,
Uh,
whoa.
I will
If it
say
takes me out of the
I will
tone of the
say
scene, then I think it's an issue.
I will say I do like the way the movie ends. It kind of like I really didn't like the climax as a whole, in my opinion. Like the climax just kind of like
Yeah,
it's too much
it
for
was
me. There was like
weird.
so many things. Huh?
No, I agree. I thought that the ending kind of fight scene through the or yeah, chase scene, I guess, through the building was oh, weird. I thought it was long.
Yeah.
There were
You
some
think it was
portions of it where nothing was happening, and I didn't understand.
exactly and like
It
my and
felt
like once again the
awkward and
goddamn
uncomfortable, but I don't know if that was
exactly.
the intent entirely. It was strange.
But like once again, my biggest problem is like he doesn't feel like a guy who can actually capably handle himself there, and like he's supposed to be a hunter. Like I expect him to be at least somewhat capable, but like I get he's weakened a little bit, but he really didn't put up that great of a fight. Number one, number two, the villain was just doing some like the villain was turning into some crazy Frankenstein monster thing, like being I don't know I forgot the character. Like there's a certain character in
Right.
mind that he was acting like, but he was
Ooh, okay.
like all over the place, like sassy, like all over the place. Just some weird British guy, like thinking
Yeah, that's
he's like
fun.
crazy and all that stuff. But like I did kind of like the last shot and like the last ending, like how it abruptly ends. It's like, are we
That was
going?
cool.
I forgot exactly how it ends, but like he takes
Yeah, it gets in the
Rachel,
elevator and then it done black
and then
screen.
it just
Yeah.
abruptly ends. Yeah, I do kind of like that a little bit. It did save the movie a little bit for me
Ooh,
personally,
theatrical version.
but like only because like there I'd say the ambiguous tone is kind of like I forgive ambiguous tones if it ends on it, like in certain ways. Like there are a lot of movies that I love that end ambiguously, but like I feel like the ending is a little bit better because they're like right there and then the audience finishes the story and right there and then has to reflect on what just happened. So I think it
Yeah.
works there personally.
I
But
yeah,
like
oh
once
god.
again, the climax just was not for me at all. I really
It
didn't
was
like it.
odd. I will say I don't really I think when the movie was trying to I will say haven't mentioned it so far. The first movie's score I thought was really effective for the most part. I thought that during the intro, both the opening crawl, which was way more kind of intense than I expected,
Yeah, the
and just
opening
the
crawl
opening
is really for both
the
movies is really
I
great.
should have looked up the title before I did it, but the name of the kind of the saxophone track that plays a few times in the movie, I like that track a lot. I thought it was like, ooh, this is fun. I like what it's going for. The first time it played, this might be a theatrical thing. I don't quite remember it in the final cut. It played like 3 or 4 times throughout the movie, and I'm not the biggest fan of when such distinct tracks are spammed in movies. There are a few instances, for instance, mentioned it earlier in Star Wars movies. I also find it annoying when like the same kind of theme or the same thing is played like multiple times, and it's just like, yeah, I know, and
That's what's iconic about it. That's what's iconic about the
I
opening tracks of
don't.
the Star Wars music. That's awesome.
No,
Come on.
no, I don't mean between the series. I mean within one movie. If the same track is
What do you
used like
know?
numerous times in one movie, then I find it distracting
Why?
most of the time.
Why?
Because I'm not thinking just about, or I'm not getting immersed in the tone it's trying to portray. I'm remembering, oh yeah, this is that song from that one scene.
There's,
I can't get
I
absorbed in that.
completely disagree. The one of the a lot of movies out there have like very similar themes for a lot of different moments, and it works in my opinion quite a lot. Like Star Wars has it, like Batman has it, like just like
Uh,
Dune has it. There's just so many things that have like I get like each like characters can have a certain theme, and I think that works. Maybe like if you give two very very different
I'd say
characters
you
the
can
exact same
definitely
thing,
give a
then
character
like yeah,
like a motif or like a chord progression that's attached to that specific character. I don't. I mean, I do. I'm not a fan, just as a rule of thumb, of when a track in its entirety. I think it was probably aided by the fact that in this movie there are many scenes where the music is like the only auditory stimulus. Where there are some instances where the score is like almost. It's basically establishing shots, and the score is the
yeah.
scene. And in that sense, if it's going to be the same track multiple times, then it's not going to have the same impact the other times that it's played. You can't. There's only so many times where you can elicit or try to, because even just on a basic point of view, that if you're playing the same track in these scenes, it means to an extent you're trying to elicit the same emotional reaction in these scenes over and over. And I think as a rule of thumb in any work,
Or juxtapose them, maybe.
that could work. Yeah, that I think in the again, it can be interesting for that sense. That's true, but again, in general, the more you play the same track, it makes you think about it. It makes you think about it mid movie, and I think that can obviously where I've already said how I already think that it's fine for a movie to have that expectation, but it will inevitably inherently make the emotional impact of that track lessen, and maybe the scene lessen as a result. Again, this might be a theatrical cut issue because especially I think it was most obnoxious in the which I wanted to get into the theatrical cuts ending, which is really shit. It's really
Oh
really
yeah, I did
it's
hear
bad
like was it did it end with like him in a car with
with Rachel.
her
Yeah,
and like
so
him just narrating like its happy ending or I did
basically, yeah.
that
Well, it was. I think it was trying to be a bit bittersweet, but it was really. I thought it was just incredibly bland and corny, and just did not fit the rest of the movie presentationally.
I
Where
did see the clip a little bit. It was
it was
kind of funny once
weird.
again.
It was like, I don't. What are you doing? Like, it completely. It was a very stark tonal shift, just with like the brightness of it, the kind of sappy kind of sax track playing, and just the narration of being like, I'm not sure what's happened, but like it'll be alright. Like that kind of vibe. It was really, really. I'd say that the main kind of mood that most of the movie is kind of very effectively, in my view, goes for is kind of this discomfort from the unknown, or this kind of confusion where you are. I think it very successfully makes you uncomfortable because of what you don't know. I think it puts you in a situation where you're curious but kind of feel at. I think it makes you uneasy very successfully throughout the entire movie, and whoa, the really harsh juxtaposition, which again in theory can work here, just into this kind of sappy, in my opinion, kind of creatively bankrupt, moodless, vapid, kind of cliched ending. Whoa, it did not work for what the movie was going for, and it was just kind of unset. It made me like the first time I saw it, I was like, "What? That's weird." Like it felt like it was not going for what the rest of the movie was going for, especially considering that just in terms of the sequence of events there, it has kind of that what in the context of the theatrical cut is basically a random cliffhanger of the origami unicorn into the elevator door close, hard cut to that scene. It really does feel like it's like skipping something, like it's skipping an emotion that was supposed to be conveyed. It's very weird, and then it just kind of overwrites it with that obnoxious, lazy narration. It was bad. It was really really bad. It took me out of it very hard. I'm very glad that I watched
Yeah.
the final cut after, because that what what a weird. I'm kind of mortified that it feels weird to me that that is something that I mean, I get it, but the fact that general audiences were more. I mean, clearly not that much, but the fact that that's the type of thing that kind of the filmmakers got the vibe that this is what the audience wants. Like what signal was being sent? Because this was really bland. It was really really uninspired. It was
The over
just boo-boo.
explanation is kind of funny. Just like once again the way that the Harrison Ford acts is
Yeah,
really
it's
funny.
really weird that it's the
It's
entire
stupid.
theatrical cut where I'd say the biggest again it took me out of the movie so hard where every subtlety in Harrison Ford's performance is basically overridden in the theatrical cut because of the narration.
Oh yeah,
Where it's like
exactly.
every time, like there's like a close up on his face after like a scene where like you're led to kind of think about what that performance was trying to elicit. He basically just talks to the camera and just says what he was like. Oh, I was, I thought this or blah blah blah. When and obviously there were some instances where he was just explaining like the plot in case like for the people in the back that didn't get it. Where that one, that's also kind of funny, but I that whatever. But when it comes to just like trying explaining elements of the character that were 100% like available to the audience without that, it was really really annoying. Like after any scene where I was thinking like, oh, what's going through the character's head? What does this mean for him? Like it would be immediately told to you. It was like a being spoon fed. It's like I was a baby, and I do not want my like sci-fi movie going for a tone of uneasiness to make me feel baby. That's not. That's the worst thing that I would want is a babyfication, and that's definitely what it did, which is really icky. It was a very obnoxious. I'm very sad that that's the first version of it that I was exposed to.
Well, at least there was the director's cut, but yeah,
Thank God.
I didn't watch that scene in the context of like a whole movie, but I did watch it. It was just funny. I was like, that plus the corny ass climax. If that's how it ended, I would have been pretty like damn disappointed. I would probably even call the movie pretty bad.
Yeah, it would give
if
a
that's how
very
it
yeah,
ended.
well yeah, it was very different vibe, but I will say I think
Yeah.
that what kept me because I mentioned the score already. I'll say I think this movie aged very well visually. Where for the most part, there were
Um.
maybe some like CGI like plane or the car. I don't know what you want me to call. I guess
Once
car
again, the world building
things.
is pretty good. It holds up still today pretty well, I'd say. Yeah, I would agree.
I'd just say
Like,
from a
and
visual
that is
standpoint,
due to the visual aspect.
yeah,
Yeah,
I'd
that is
say
due to
that
the visual aspect.
for instance in the set piece with like in the apartment of the one guy, what was his name? Like Sebastian, I think. The kind of genetic modifier that guy. In his kind of apartment with all the weird like creatures or kind of I guess people or like servants they
Toys,
had.
yeah, people,
That
toys, yeah, that was weird.
environment was very visually stimulating and freaky and creepy. It definitely was. It was very interesting. There were a lot of just like different, just colored hues. Just the color palette was very varied throughout between like kind of the green kind of lighting of some of the city environments, just like the harsh blue, frigid kind of environment of that one laboratory with guy working on the eyes, and then that kind of at points like pink kind of environment, or which felt even kind of like organic of his apartment. It was very varied visually. It was which kind of it was engaging. It was wonderful in that sense. It was a visual treat for sure for me, which definitely helped me kind of keep um like engagement throughout, especially at points where things were like a little slower paced. It gave you stuff to chew
Yeah,
on 100%.
yeah, definitely. I would once again the world building and the overall like atmosphere and the visual style of of both movies in general is really really interesting, and I do really like it.
I'd say that
But
it was
yeah,
different in terms of what. Okay, so we'll get into it more with the next movie, but I will say, I I am not sure which of these movies I prefer the interpretation of the world more, because I really
I like the second movie a lot better,
I
in my
think that
opinion.
there were some instances in the second movie where I think it's again it's tricky because I thought definitely there were a few more locations probably in the second movie that were reused throughout. I thought in general the presentation of 2049 was a little more standard than this movie was. I thought this movie had a
Was it?
lot more like just freaky and out there and creative set pieces than that movie might have. There were definitely
I
still
completely
visually
disagree.
interesting things. That's crazy.
I thought that the
Interesting.
second movie was better on visual, not just because it was created more modern, but like just because they were able to expand on so many different visual aspects, and like also like the women dancing in the streets, and like that whole like visual style, like that's freaky too. And I felt and like just everything going on, it was so interesting. Like I feel like it just expanded on the world on so many different levels, and that's why I liked it better in the
I mean,
second
from a
movie.
world building point of view, I agree. I just
English
mean
guy,
purely from a who's talking. Okay, I'll call you out next time you say
English guy.
some
Remember your
silly
first
shit.
language.
Okay, well, I don't want to hear it, but the, I thought that just purely in terms of the creativity or kind of uniqueness of those set pieces, or even just like the color palette of the film or the visual language of a lot of these environments, I thought was more varied at the very least in the original, which I thought just gave it a bit of a interesting tone that I the second movie wasn't trying to capture, but I think that the environments in that one were a little more normal by comparison, or a little more standard. There was other interesting stuff going on. We'll get into that, but just on that standpoint, that was definitely a treat from the original specifically that I enjoyed a lot.
Agree a little bit, but both worlds are really really interesting either way. So yeah, is this a good place
Yeah,
to
we
start
can get
wrapping
into
up the
ratings.
circle?
Yeah, for this
Um,
movie.
I guess you can go first. Let's see how much you rate this one since you're so tough
Okay.
on your ratings, and this is
I
the first movie
so
that I think is not great.
Yeah, this is where we might differ. So, for context, in our previous episode, Matt rated both movies much like 2 to 3 points higher than I did, or at least,
I'm
well,
not completely nitpicky,
but
and
even for the one where I preferred it over him, I think I still was more harsh on it. But I think we'll see here where I would attribute that more to a matter of I just think I have a different standard for what I enjoy in these movies, because I think for the original Blade Runner, I think I'd give it right now I'm landing on an 8 out of 10 right now, I think. I am leaning toward probably I'm leaning more toward a 7 than a 9, definitely, but I'm going to give it an 8 for now. I enjoyed it. I liked it a lot. I thought it was fun. 100%.
a little better,
Most of the
a little
issues I
better for
have
your
with it
standards.
I would consider kind of nitpicky and don't ruin the experience of it in the final cut. I enjoyed it. I thought it was really unique and fun visually. I like what it was doing. I like how it explored it. I really like how much of it was left for you to think back on. Love the tone. Really holds up really well for the most part. It was great. I loved it. It was fun. Am I probably gonna rewatch it?
I think I think I'll give it a 5.5 out of 10. I
Whoa,
didn't enjoy it.
fascinating.
Yeah, I know. Feels like I might. You know what? That's great. I'll give it a 6 out of 10. Yeah,
Okay, there we go.
there's a lot there. That's still failing grade in my opinion, but there's a
This
lot
guy.
there that I think is very very interesting. The world is really really unique and fascinating, and and the whole setup you can say a lot about it, and there's so much to explore. I just feel like the way they told the story was very all over the place, not really focused on a lot of things, and they really didn't. I get being vague and being vague and deep, but like you need to hook your audience in somehow, and I just think that it just didn't do that for me that much. So yeah, I give it a 6 out of 10.
Okay, interesting. All
All
right,
right, so next movie, Blade Runner
into
2049.
2049.
This was made I think in 2017, released in
Bit of
2017,
a funky
and
gap here. 35-year gap. Oh lord.
yeah, Jesus. But it, yeah, based on what I heard, so like at that point, Denis Villeneuve was a pretty well-respected director. He had made a lot of great big movies, but I think this was the first movie that really started putting him on the map, like where people started really recognizing him on a big scale. Before that, he had done smaller movies that were still very, very impressive, but people didn't see it as much. However, this movie really did kind of make his visual style like recognizable to a lot of people. Like from then on, it was always Denis Villeneuve from the man who brought you Blade Runner 2049. So there's just yeah, I'd say the background is like he's a big fan of the original Blade Runner movie and wanted to create a very interesting sequel that expanded on the world. And once again, this movie also wasn't that successful. It was I will say it was more financially successful than the other movie, mainly because I think his visual style and also like the way he kind of presented it was a little bit more unique and interesting. But as a whole, it still didn't do great financially, and I do still think it is because it was attached to that older movie that people were like, "Oh, it's that movie." And also, I feel like because a lot of people maybe didn't want to go see that movie because of the reception it had, and just no one went to see it. But this movie did very, very well critically, and I think even won an award. I'm not sure at the Oscars, but the point is it put Denis Villeneuve on the map, and right now he's considered after the Dune movies, he's considered like one of the most sought out directors in the industry to the point where he's actually, get this, going to be directing the new James Bond movie.
Ooh, funky. Okay.
I thought Amazon Prime was going to screw over that franchise, but they might have just saved it. So who knows?
Okay, funky, funky. Okay.
Yeah. What do you have? Anything you have to add on the background?
Um, Not so much. So yeah, this was the first Denis Villeneuve film that I've seen. Not because I have not intentionally avoided him. I've heard nothing but positive about him as a filmmaker. It's just I haven't seen Dune. I didn't see Dune when it released, and I have not gotten to the rest of his filmography quite yet. After this, I'm curious because this movie's cool and I like it, as which we'll get into. Not a hot take. This movie's very well regarded at this point. Um,
Yeah.
it's I'm interested when it comes to because knowing some of his other movies being some of them way more grounded in premise to an extent, and then Dune also being like a bigger sci-fi scale thing.
They
I'm
all have the same tone. They all have the same tone. I'll say that. They
hmm,
all have a very you understand that you're in a Denis Villeneuve movie because the main thing he focuses on is tone and atmosphere. He has a very similar atmosphere in the way he shoots and directs and like lays out the world is very similar in all of his movies, and that's what I love about him.
okay. That's interesting because like if someone told me that about a director, I would assume they're bad. This is
What do
like
you
a
mean?
not a positive. If someone tells me that a director, most of their work has the same tone and atmosphere, I would think they don't have good
It's
range.
no, it's a unique tone. It's a unique
I
tone.
would
What do you
say
like?
that
I'd say
within their
it's a
filmography, they don't have a unique range. Because
no,
I've
it's a
never
unique
heard
tone. They
someone
explore
say that about him before. That's
I've known
interesting.
many directors like I know when I'm watching a Kubrick movie. I know when I'm watching a
Well,
Quentin
I don't mean
Tarantino
that. I
movie.
mean you
I know
could
when I'm watching a Christopher
recognize
Nolan movie.
kind of
I know
how
when
they
I'm watching
use.
a
No,
Zack
no.
Snyder
You
movie.
could definitely, for sure, but you could definitely recognize a certain filmmaker style. I mean specifically them going for the same tone consistently is usually a red flag for me. When I see a Snyder movie, I want to die
He
because.
usually has dark tones. It's usually dark.
Well, yeah, that
I'll
doesn't
say
mean it's
that.
exactly the same though. Okay, I'll see
Not the same tone.
when we
He what
see
I'm
more
trying
of
to
it.
say is that he has a very very unique style that I really love.
Okay, okay, interesting. Okay, then no, I did. Okay, so yeah, getting into this movie, expanding on a lot of things from the original. I think they're very different in my opinion, but I think that the world is pretty cohesive in terms of like, definitely feels like a satisfying natural progression of kind of the state of the original movie and what it was setting up. But I think stylistically and tonally, while certain, I think that since thematically they're similar, there's inevitably going to be some things in terms of the tone that are maintained, but they definitely have a distinct style. I really enjoyed what the original was going for, but I think that this movie was very effective in what it was trying to emotionally communicate throughout. I thought it was engaging for the most part. I thought it was fun. I liked it. What are you thinking?
Yeah, same. I'm sorry. I still have some trouble with the themes and ideas, but I think it was made a lot more clear and more interesting in general. Like the other movie was interesting in its tone, but once again what I love about Denis Villeneuve is that he really wants to make you completely invested in a world and learn so much more about it, and that's what I really love about him. I think he does a great job here. Just the way he sets it up originally, just the way he shoots the scene, though, just the way he really gets you to start like looking at this, seeing I haven't seen this type of like world before, and I want to learn a lot more about it. And the way he kind of like, in a blunt way, approaches you with the blunt realities of this world and the harsh realities that these characters have to face and understand. I just think he like just the atmosphere was a lot more like dug into. Like he really stretched it out a lot in a way that I think really worked and just made the story and the world as a whole more interesting and effective. So yeah, that's what I really loved about the movie as a whole. And also just the themes in general were a lot better. like a lot more interesting and much more
Mm,
explored in an interesting way. Even though like even if, no, though if I don't still fully understand everything, I want to learn more about that movie, and that's something I can't really say about the last movie. Like here, I want to learn more about the deeper meanings and ideas of this movie. Where once again, I can't say that about the other movie.
interesting. I thought that both. So in terms of what I came away with from both of them, which now we'll also probably get into more here. I kind of glossed over it before, which is the kind of wider interpretation of these movies, and specifically how that first one kind of interacts with this one and people's wider view of it. I think that they're saying very similar things thematically. I just think that they're going about it in different ways plot wise. I think that I like what. So before we get into spoilers, I like this movie again. I like how it expands on the premise of the original and how it uses that world to tell kind of a different. It takes a different angle on what. Again, the movie is set after the original, so inevitably it kind of progresses the world in a literal sense. And I think that progression of the concept of this movie as well, which is, just to keep it as like completely spoiler view free as possible, which is how I went into it. Um, it does kind of go a step beyond what the original is doing conceptually, and I found that interesting, and I really like what they did with it and how they used kind of the main premise and main aspects of this premise in the world and how they integrated it into the main plot of the movie. And I think that what it's saying with a few like some additional elements in terms of exploring a few different things that I found interesting, and I think it uses the kind of the wider cast maybe a bit more effectively than the original. I think that but I do think what it's going for in terms of what it's saying in and of itself is pretty similar to what I came away from the original with. Maybe it's aided by the fact that again I saw them both very close together, so it could be that I'm kind of associating them more because of how I saw them more as one story than they really were, and just considering the time gap between when they were created compared to the time gap of when I saw them. But I did feel like they were kind of intrinsically connected in terms of the themes that they're going for. And I found it interesting in both of them for different I found both of them interesting in how in terms of how they're communicating those themes for different reasons where I think I'd mainly say that the original is way more based on its visuals and its tone in terms of how it's communicating the emotions it wants to and what it's saying with that. While I think this one focuses more on character a bit more, and I think it mainly uses those characters and their dialogue and kind of the plot as a whole to communicate what it's saying more. And I find both of them interesting, but I did think that this movie made me more invested in each individual kind of character as a person and kind of prompted me as a viewer to engage with each of them and what they're trying to communicate in terms of their dialogue, their names, even aspects of their designs. I think they're more interesting as people in this movie than the characters in the original, and I think it helped me stay engaged throughout in a different way than the original. I'm not sure which I found more interesting consistently while I was watching it. It helps that this one is like way longer, which isn't helping. And I don't think I felt the length too much, but it was there. It was indeed like an hour. It was over an hour longer, and I felt it for sure. But I don't think I was not bored throughout, and I was interested in different stuff, but I was engaged for sure. It was interesting. It was fun. What are your overall thoughts?
I very much disagree in the fact that like I think once again this movie made like the ideas and themes that it was really trying to go for a lot more about like through like it made it a lot more clear in the character actions and what the characters were doing and what the overall idea was going for. And I feel like I don't know how do I want to get into spoiled territory yet or
No, let's give more general stuff before we get into that and
so
like
yeah,
general
I guess
impressions.
what my like once again my problem with the original was that it was very just it was too vague and it had a good idea and a good world and and a good like seed to go off of. I just felt like there wasn't really it was very disorganized and like I couldn't really follow it in a meaningful way where I actually like felt a connection to the characters and the story as a whole and kind of ultimately didn't care about where it was going. The reason in this movie it's a lot more it's a lot more clear and centralized, and I do like that because you really get to you can build off of what you already know in the previous movie and learn more about this world in different ways, which we'll get into spoilers about how they specifically do that.
Mm.
But overall, it's just more interesting because they actually make the themes and elements that you alluded to in the previous movie an actual central part of their plot that is really what the whole movie is completely about. It's not just like one single scene where you can one single dream scene where you can kind of like interpret it as like, oh my god, it could all be about this. No, the entire movie is literally intertwined with that exact theme. And that's the reason why I do find that a little bit more interesting. And they also have like a great score, and they also have a great world building. They expand on it in so many interesting ways at the same time, while having an interesting central core theme that guides the audience through this story in a way that they can follow it while being exposed to the great aspects of everything else of this world. So that's why I think this movie is a lot better than the original movie, in my opinion.
I'd say it's definitely way more explicit in terms of its messaging as well as just its character motivations. I think in general, it's more explicit. I'd say that I think I largely chalk that down to just the fact that the original, I'd say, again, most of what it's presenting is through the score, in terms of the visuals, in terms of things like that, where a lot of what you're getting out of it is based on the tone that it's communicating. It's based on the set design. It's based on the world, and it's based on the subtext of specific kind of decisions being made in that sense. Where I think this movie, not it's definitely more in your face with both the plot and the messaging. I think it's a lot more
Yeah, but it
explicit in
makes
that
it
sense.
better, in my opinion,
I'd
because like it
say
makes it more clear.
I don't.
Like I don't like when messages are like hammered into your face like oh my god, we're making it about this theme and this theme and like this issue and this issue. But here it's a guiding idea that really weaves the story together and has all the other great elements, the world, the score, the characters like weave around it in a really consistently interesting way, and that pushes the story forward. And as we go deeper and deeper into this world, we're still held on to that guiding theme that is consistently holding everything together. Meanwhile, in the original movie, I felt like once again it's just the tone, it's the tone, the world, the music, and like everything around that you can find so engaging, and I find engaging too. But there was no like centrality to it that was
I'd
guiding
say
the
there was.
audience
I'd say there
through that.
definitely was. Again, I'd say
I
it's
didn't
largely
sense
more of
that
the
much.
tone than it is character motivated. I'd say in the original, which I like.
Yeah,
I find it to some degree more. Okay, I think that what this movie is doing is more accessible in terms of this is way more akin to what most movies are doing, or at least especially most modern movies are doing, in terms of how they're communicating kind of their stories and the subtext of it. I think the subtext of it is more based on things that are more easily recognizable or identifiable. Being again, most the characters have aspects of their acting, aspects of even like again their names, how their designs. I think it's definitely focusing more on those. I think it's more character driven and more like individual scene premise driven even than it is in the original, which I think again I am partial to things that are doing something more unique relative to other movies or other works of art. So I find that fascinating in the original. I do not think one is better than in the original in terms of being more emotionally effective or more like communicating its themes more properly. Generally, there are exceptions where I think it can differ, but in this case, that does not make me prefer the original over this one. It's just a difference, and I think that's probably a difference that results in the split, like the discrepancy in opinion for you and for a lot of people between the two movies. I will
it's
say
just I like there was I
that
just want to learn more about this world after watching this movie is what I ultimately got out of it, and more than I want to learn more about it in the last movie, and that's ultimately what I'm judging
yeah,
on
it's
because
interesting because I found it the
this world
opposite.
is good.
I thought that
Really?
I was way more curious about decisions being made with regards to the visuals and a bunch of given scenes in the original. Well, when I saw this movie, I was satisfied. I thought it was interesting, but I'm thinking about a lot of decisions with regards to the dialogue, specific characters, how they were presented, how they were acted, but I'm not as curious about the world or the visual presentation of it as much as I was with the original.
I
For sure.
disagree to the extent that I'd say both of them equally, maybe for personally for me, The new movie does it better, but I think both of them flesh out the world and the overall tone of this whole atmosphere
Well,
and
I'm not
world
just saying
pretty well.
the world building. I'm saying like the cinematography. I mean like
No,
specifically
y-
like the
I,
choices
with all
being
due
made in that
respect,
regard.
I think the cinematography. Maybe it's just because of, maybe it's just because it's more modern and it looks better. But like Roger Deakins, the guy who's like direct, who's like gotten quite a few awards for like some best cinematography and like photo shots. I think that the new movie looks so much more interesting and so much better than the original. I feel like the original was just mainly cities. This one like
I would
really
not say
expands on
that.
world. It goes to other cities. It goes to like kind of in the air, like car scenes, and like that that was more, and like also goes to these giant statues and these unique aspects. It really zooms in and zooms out. It goes so broad and unique. Plus, it has an interesting central guiding theme of a story that pushes the story forward, wrapped around with this whole world building that's constantly
This is gonna
like
be interesting because
like
I think we're gonna
expanding.
disagree on what that central theme even is, but we'll get into that. But
Yeah,
I will say I
but yeah, as
don't
a whole,
think
I just
anything
think that the world building is
visually in
better.
this movie was as unique as, for instance, that one up the room in the apartment in the original. For instance, I don't think anything in this movie was as like strange or high like unique conceptually as that. I think again, I thought it
Agree.
was
I can list. I no, I very much. I can list so many things that are very interesting and unique. Like
more
one of my
unique
most unique, completely unique. Yes,
to this movie.
absolutely.
I we'll get into it. Okay, I'm curious now.
I have
Okay,
so much to talk about. Yeah, because once again, I'm a
interesting.
big
Okay.
Denis Villeneuve fan.
But yeah,
So.
so we're both fans of it for sure. Definitely more kind of explicit in its messaging plot wise. I will say you still probably should watch the original if you're planning to watch this one, just because elements of its plot
No, it's a
are
given. You do have to watch
yeah,
the
it
original
is a
to
sequel,
understand this one.
but they're not going for the same. It's interesting regardless, either one, regardless of which you prefer. I'd say as a complete package, it's fascinating that way. But yeah, we both like it. It's cool. It's fun. It's interesting. It's well presented. It's cool. You can go watch it. All right, spoiler time. There's a lot
Okay.
going on here.
Okay. So where to begin? Okay. So spoilers. Three, two, one. You don't think that the whole like I think it was a sex scene, but like the whole idea of him trying to interact through his robot like or visual lady when she's literally intertwined with another
Yeah, that
body
was cool.
of like that other woman. That was completely cool. I never seen an effect like that completely where two faces literally blended together almost perfectly. Genuinely, I had
Um,
never seen an effect that interesting before. And like they were still
that's
out of
true.
sync, but it was interesting because they were the same body in many ways. I had never seen that before.
I am yeah.
Like that's really
Hmm,
unique.
that was unique. I when I was talking about earlier was less so a scene concept thing and just like a purely like an environment concept thing, like set design concept. But that
Well, set
scene
design as a whole too.
was no, that scene was interesting. I thought that it would. This is something with the movie as a whole, and I think it might be because let me get my facts right specifically. This movie's long, and I think that
Yeah, it's
in
2 hours and
part
43 minutes.
I don't think just thinking of it structurally, I don't think anything needs to be like cut out or anything like that. I don't. It wasn't like that. I think it was more down to maybe a few specific scenes or even shots lingering a bit longer than I think was necessary. I think some things I would describe as a little overindulgent, where I found them interesting. It's just that it held for a few seconds too long. Where that scene, for instance, it was an interesting effect. I just thought that it was scene dragged on for a fair bit. I thought it was interesting conceptually. It's just in terms of like just pure pacing of the scene, it wasn't
Yeah,
as
I thought it was interesting because the
emotionally
entire
kind of
idea is like
compelling.
it's trying to like blend the two faces together and literally have that effect
Yeah, the effect was interesting.
like
No, it was
be
cool, and also thematically, it was just a really high concept, fun sci-fi premise, and visually, it was definitely stunning. This movie's held up
it's the
very.
only
It
thing
looks
I guess the
beautiful.
only
This
thing like
movie looks great.
yeah. I guess the only thing visually that's different is like I guess the original shows the city a lot more. But like even then, like a lot more, I get that, but like even then, this movie like expands. It goes like outside to the farm. It goes into the like the whole factory. It goes to this whole like orange, dusty new world, which I think was Las Vegas, Los
I think
Angeles,
it
or
was. I think it was
whatever it was.
Vegas. Yeah,
Yeah, like it was so interesting,
that
so
was
unique, and
cool.
it went to that whole like car scene where everybody's drowning. It went into like the offices. Like it went into this whole like conceptual reality where the the memory aspect where you're recreating memories. So yeah, on a visual level, I think this movie does takes the original movie and like really makes it like really expands on it in so many
That's kind
different
of true.
ways visually. So very much disagree that the other movie is better visually.
I didn't say it was better visually. I just said it was more varied in terms of its color palette and its whatchamacallit, and its setting. But I will
I
say
disagree.
that I
There's
am
outside rain. There's Los Angeles with the orange
there's rain.
scene. There's the apartment. There's the whole memory scene. Very different palette, color wise, palette wise.
I will say I am still in turn in terms of like thematic interpretation. I think there's something fun with kind of the bees in the kind of Vegas scene, kind of swarming around his hand, and them being like that kind of the bees are just it's just a fun metaphor conceptually in this story where they all kind of functioning around one entity and them being kind of drones with debatably not like a total consciousness of their own, maybe not the most decision making. I thought that was a very just fun inclusion. From a literal perspective, I'm confused on why they were there. I'm still trying to
Yeah,
interpret like literally why the bees were there in the middle of
like
nowhere.
like they're like or some you just,
I,
but yeah.
can you repeat? Hold on,
As a whole, like
I don't think the mic picked that up. Can you repeat what was going on there?
I don't think that matters as much
Well,
visually, in my opinion.
well, not talking
Like,
visually. I mean, like literally, why
yeah,
was it
yeah,
there?
I know what you mean. Yeah, I know.
There
What you
was
mean. I
a
don't
lot
think
of stuff like that in the
like
original. I'm curious. Those are
yeah,
the most
fair.
interesting things in either movie to me are decisions in terms of scenes that are not clear plot wise what's going on. Those are the most
Yeah,
interesting things to me in basically any movie are just visually distinct things that clearly have some metaphorical or symbolic significance that's completely subtext and not clear. And in that scene, I legitimately don't know what was happening. I'm curious.
yeah,
I love that both of these movies have things like that where it's like I need to think on it because I literally don't know why
yeah,
that was there.
that's fair. But I will say one thing that I think this movie does a lot better. I think is the main character. I think Ryan Gosling's Blade Runner feels actually like a hunter, like a capable guy that's actually capable of holding his own in the city and not being like beaten at every turn, who kills a reasonable amount of people and who's like once again very capable, and I could actually believe and also has like the attitude, and I can actually believe that he's actually a hunter whose job it is to to kill other replicants. So on that aspect, I think he doesn't enjoy it, and I think that's a really interesting aspect. It's like this is just a job I have to do, just like kind of go along with it. It's going to make it more difficult if you resist. I think like once
I
again
thought
that's
that
a
was
really
something
really
in both
interesting
movies, to
aspect.
be honest. I thought the performances
No, I really
communicated it
didn't see.
differently.
Once again, I don't think Harrison Ford's like not on him, but like I think maybe the directing and the script. But I didn't believe him as an actual hunter, as like a capable hunter, because like once again he doesn't really hold his own that well. He kills like maybe
In the physical
them.
performance, I see that. I mean, literally from just like a plot standpoint. I think both of them have it's just interesting conceptual, or like I mean, it's kind of standard conceptually, but I think that in both movies, I like that they're both kind of numbing themselves a bit in terms of the emotional weight of their job and how, for instance, Harrison Ford's Decker is like an alcohol, like he's always drinking, like it was like a bottle in every scene, and
I
even
see
it's
that, I
carried over
understand that, but
to the
like
next one. Like, and I think in this movie, Ron Gosling, he's like sleeping a lot, or and I mean also just like
no, his
even
just
the
like whole
AI
attitude is like
girlfriend.
he's
Yeah,
numb
he's
to it.
it definite. Well, it seems like he's. I don't think he is numb to it. I think he's trying to be numb to it. I would put it more as I think he's trying to tune it out a bit and trying to. I think in a lot of scenes, especially because we'll get into it. A scene that I did see before the movie, or even well, I think a lot of people they've seen the GIF of the scene before the movie, where
The
like
what?
in the scene where just like I just like in memes or something like that. The scene where he was told that his memories were real falsely, but that scene, his reaction of like being like, God damn it, like that reaction I
Oh
thought was
yeah.
fun, where interesting, where his reaction was not like, oh, I'm special, cool, yeah, it was that, which would have been kind of way more standard in that regard. He was like pissed. He was like scared and frustrated. And I thought that was a really fun angle to take, and just like a really good instance of how he doesn't want this pressure for the most of the movie. He does not want this weight on him. He doesn't want to feel like to have to navigate this. He would much rather have something kind of, and this is something in both the movies 100%, where they both of these main leads kind of, and I thought it's one of the most, it's what makes these characters like interesting to follow, what gives them kind of that journey of a main character in a sense, is that they both kind of start from a place of they want more of a sense of normalcy than they have. They do not want this job. They do not want this position. They do not want this burden, this moral, physical, emotional burden on them. And they're kind of trying to numb it in some sense. They're trying to get away from it. And ultimately, to an extent, they both break past that after in these movies. They both kind of choose to make more of a circumstance for themselves. And I think honestly, that's kind of the point of both movies. The way I see it, I think both movies are trying to go over how kind of what to do with your life given the position that you were forced into, or given the position that you're in, is what do you make of it, in a sense. I think that's kind of what both movies are getting down to, which we'll get into more later. And I think that was more overt in this movie for sure, but I think that's the main thematic through line for both.
Once again, I agree with that. I just feel it's a lot more clear in this movie than it is in the other movie, because once again, it's like the central idea of the plot. His character really is the main character. We kind of learn to know a lot of everything about him, his quirks, his personality, and I love his like just monotone demeanor, or like his monotone attitude was like kind of like yeah, I know. Yeah. Trust me. Anyway, but like his overall attitude towards the language, not the language, but for his job, and just the way he acts and the way he kind of moves, it's a lot more clear than with Harrison Ford's character. Once again, I did not get that message across, and I did not get that theme across because it just didn't feel like it was at that focused, or like I don't think that's what the character was either directed to or written to, like maybe written to, but definitely not directed to sound like. But as a whole, I will say, well, speaking of that, the whole plot of the second movie is about possibly, is he actually a replicant? Is he actually like?
Well, he is a replicant.
Is
but is he?
Well,
is he not a
wait,
replicant? It starts where
I'm trying to remember.
is a replicant.
Is it like, does it make, because it goes back on something?
Oh no, it goes back.
No, he is a replicant.
He is a replicant, and he was trying to figure out, is he actually like a real person, son of two replicants? So is he born or made?
It was about whether he was actually no, it would technically be whether he was either the first full-born replicant or the first half human, half replicant. Since it's
okay, well, again, I am going with Ridley Scott, and just my interpretation of the first movie, that Deckard was a replicant. What the movie was trying to make you, like, just from a basic plot standpoint, was kind of going between and what eventually, throughout the certain point in the movie, he kind of came to the conclusion that he was the son of Deckard and Rachel, which would mean that he is a born replicant, rather than manufactured one. However, again, the kind of twist there was that he isn't the son of them. He was a built replicant that was made as a cover-up to protect the actual daughter from being found out by the corporations.
That was the only thing that kind of did confuse me, was what they said it was twins. And I was like,
yeah, that's just not
true.
So
they just dropped that whole idea at the end? Was it like some sort of?
No, what are you talking? No, like, they showed it, and like where they played Deckard saying also like, we mixed up, blah blah blah. No, they just swapped his medical records, his DNA records. Like on file, his DNA records matched the daughter's. They weren't actually twins. There was only one kid, and it was the daughter. It's just that they made it seem like he was the son to throw off the trail. Like that whole organization that was protecting the daughter, like all that replicant revolution group, they kind of, and Deckard himself, they all swapped that stuff out to throw off the trail of I guess Wallace, or was that the company's name? I'm gonna look it up, but that
Wallace,
yeah,
Wallace something. That's the main. That's Jared Leto's
yeah. Who I mean, especially considering how close that movie came out. This movie came out relative to Suicide Squad. His performance here was very convincing. Yeah, pretty. Let me Suicide Squad.
Suicide Squad. No. Oh, a year difference. Yeah, Suicide Squad.
Yeah, so the difference in it happens when you have a director, but the difference in like the performance is astounding.
Director good? Wasn't the director good of Suicide Squad? The problem was that like it was just too much studio meddling.
David Ayer. Let me quickly.
Yeah, what did he make? He made some good movies.
No, he made Bright. He made Bright with featuring Will Smith.
Oh, nah. It's not. It's a good concept. No.
Yeah, I'm not. Okay.
What else did he make?
Yeah, not he had some. I don't think he directed Fast and Furious, but he had some role in it. I'll check that. Let me see. Did he? What the? Hold on. No, he didn't. He had. I'm not sure. I don't know how much he directed himself otherwise. But yeah, not a squeaky clean track record. Either way, but we'll talk about that some other time if you want to torture me by recommending it. I don't know. But the no, Jared Leto's performance I thought was very fun in this movie.
He
Bit
was pretty
archetypal,
confusing at times, but
but
yeah,
confusing. I wouldn't say
but I
that.
like I liked it. I like it was a bit hard to follow
Speaking
for
of
me
playing
a
God,
little bit.
I thought the religious
Yeah, no, I
undertones.
get
I really like the
he was like an
religious
egotistical he was
undertones.
like an egotistical guy who like wanted like more power and all that stuff, and like he acted
I
in a
didn't
very
even
strange
think that
way.
was the purpose of that character's inclusion. I thought it was
No,
a
I
lighter
know the
commentary.
purpose of it, and I thought it was interesting. It
What
just
do you
like
think the purpose of it
uh,
was? Because I like that
he was
character's
supposed
inclusion a lot.
he wanted power, and he was like willing to like go for honestly maybe I didn't understand his character completely, but like he wanted power, and he was kind of like portrayed to be a villain of the movie, so that was kind
I
of the
mean,
way I
the
saw him.
way I thought about him, I'm still trying solidifying this aspect of it because I don't think this is the main thing that it's going for. I just think it's a fun concept being played with here, which is again, I think that the focus on these movies is free will and like the point of what do humans do with their lives basically? What choice do they make in regards to how they live? And I thought that his inclusion was a bit of a stand-in for or the force that he kind of put on the story kind of served as a fun, interesting commentary on religion in a sense, since he is throughout the entire movie is he's calling them angels. He's acting like he is like this
Yeah,
kind
I
of
see that.
harbinger of them. He's acting like they're acting out like some kind of divine will, and he's putting that angle on it where I thought that he acted as this interesting idea of how he's kind of stripping them all down into this like pretty much he's suggesting that he's giving them all this kind of profound purpose, but he is making them all like experiments for his end goal, which they don't ultimately matter for. He's the one who's acting out this vision of his, with them as kind of the conduits for it, which I thought was he again in a sense he is giving them a purpose, but he's stripping them of their autonomy completely. And I thought the fact that he did that through that kind of religious undertone of how he talked, of how he was presented, and even just the fact that he's blind, he can't even see, but at the same time he's like more controlling and more aware of just the people around him than other characters in the sense that again he literally can't see, like he meaning that he is clearly missing something human about just the world around him, but he's just has this robotic observational kind of encroachment on the people around him. I did think it was saying something about kind of religion in terms of how it affects and controls people and how they think and how they're motivated. And I thought that was a really fun concept. I'm still thinking on it too and exactly what it's saying about. I do think it's saying something about how the in terms of how in this movie this is the conclusion that Ron Gosling's character comes to and how this is opposed and how he's the antagonist. I think it is maybe saying something more negative about what maybe religion or maybe just kind of religious figures maybe or kind of authorities might what they might be doing to people in terms in or society at large in terms or maybe even just these minority groups if you're using the replicants as more of a stand-in for that what it's doing to their autonomy and their role in society. I thought that was a really fun thematic through line in this movie. I like that a lot, that inclusion. And
I mean,
that
I
was
don't
done
think, or I
basically
don't
through
think
one character's presentation.
yeah, I do like his character does mean a lot in many aspects. I don't think like a central like I don't maybe it's a central theme, but I don't think like the most important theme throughout the movie is the religious aspect. I do think it is maybe like taking advantage of a creation like that is supposed to be human, like us, and really turning it into some and really trying to deny that humanity, deny that free will for our sake, to be like to be still on top and to play God in many ways. So in that aspect, I do think it is pretty interesting and how his character relates to that. But as a whole, I think Ryan Gosling's character is still really interesting because there's like so much that's really explored about who he is and what like and what he specifically like his role is, because like a lot of people like discriminate against him early on because like he's a replicant, and he just kind of goes on with it and still and like does his work and eventually goes home and like hangs out with his like robotic girlfriend. And that kind of shows a lot about his life, his character, his style,
That's a
like
cool
what he
choice. Yeah, I like that.
values. Yeah, it's really interesting. And one of my actual personal favorite scenes is right after the "God damn it" scene where he figures out that he might be the first naturally born replicant. He immediately goes back to his normal routine, except more intensified. His normal, like I think, a
The
routine of being
check-in for the
interviewed, of
baseline, yeah.
the check-in
Which I
interview. Well, this
really
time, like
liked that just the questions being asked and like the
exactly,
whole
and just
format.
the
That was
way
a
he
really
responds.
cool
Yeah,
both of those scenes with
and
that.
it's
That was a
like,
fun idea, yeah.
and the scene before was still kind of like in your face, but he's kind of like get understanding it. Meanwhile, this time I love how like Denis Villeneuve uses like the certain sound design to really show like everything's kind of falling apart, and this guy's like not letting go at all. He's like fully screaming the questions at him, and like Ryan Gosling's character, Kay, is still like in that like calm attitude, just like calm, but also kind of feeling a bit of a hopeless attitude, like just responding. It's a really really unique scene that I really did like, and I thought it really did expand upon his character a lot. And as a whole, like this movie says a lot, and once again, it's interesting because the whole crux of the theme of this movie is that like is he actually the first like it's pretty clear, like it's a pretty clear plot point, unlike in the other movie where like it's maybe like its main message or plot point that it's trying to get across, if not in my opinion, isn't that clear, but it's pretty clear. The main central idea in the question is he actually the first natural born replicant? And if so, then it's so huge, and like it tears apart everything he's been taught, because everything he's been taught, like that he's just a replicant, is this job, is completely like false, and like he represents something else entirely. And I find that very very interesting, and that's an interesting idea, an interesting theme that's very very clearly like communicated to the audience while being
Is that a
intertwined with
theme
all
or a
the other
plot
different
point?
themes and ideas.
I want to clarify
It's
something
a
here.
theme.
So, okay, hold on.
It's a theme.
I need to
It's
say
it's
something
it's a
right
main
here.
it's a main thing.
Okay, no,
Yeah,
I
I
mean
guess
more
so.
definitionally. So when I'm talking about theme, I'm specifically saying, I'll put it, a statement made that's being made by the creators about the human condition. And not just a concept that they're bringing up, but like specifically what are they trying to communicate or say to the audience in terms of like a message that they are giving or maybe even a question that they are asking. And
I'd
I
say
I
that's
would say that
pretty
this
much.
is
I think
a
that's a theme too.
concept that the movie is like going over and it's interesting. I do not think that just in terms of like when we're wording things like this, just because I think it's important in the sense because if just so we're not apples to origin this, I wouldn't. I think that this movie does go over a lot of interesting stuff conceptually, including that. I don't think that's what it's saying thematically, just in terms of like what the
Yeah, I
message
guess so,
is or what it's
but
saying about the
it's a
human
central
condition.
plot point that's like it's a central thing that's it's a central idea that's guiding the plot throughout the movie. Like it's a really huge culmination, and ultimately that's where we're kind of hooked. It's like,
No, yeah, for sure.
Is he actually everything that he kind of fought against? Is he actually everything that he didn't know he really was? And that's such a huge thing for him. And I do really really like that. And
No, I'd
I
say
guess we can
that
kind of get it.
what I'd say
Yeah.
for
What were
that
you saying?
is that I think it's whatchamacallit. I think the reason why I wanted to clarify before my just the terminology there is that I've said this on talking to other people too about media in general where I want to make sure that what's being discussed is not being stripped down in a sense because I do think that most media can be or it ultimately is an author trying to convey something somewhat specific or trying to and not all inherent again or can portray whatever it wants to hypothetically I'm saying on a as a rule of thumb when I'm saying something a piece of work or a work is portraying something thematically I'm more so referring to like not just what it's going over conceptually or the ideas it's presenting in terms of like oh what if this thing was real what might happen if this was happening that's usually not what I'm talking about in terms of like something's theme I am usually saying that just so like we're not again talking about different stuff I'm even usually saying what is it trying to get across to the audience what message is it trying to tell them in a sense. Maybe not even make them believe. I don't think frankly, most artistic work that is trying to be an artistic work is trying to do like, you need to think this. That's not what I mean. But what is it trying to communicate as a statement about the human condition or like the world as a whole? And so I would just want to say that just because I have interacted with people before when we're talking about the same piece of media, and it's like completely, it's like we're talking about a different like area of the work entirely, because they say like, I'm not going to name the specific thing, but me and someone were talking about a show where he said, "Oh, the theme is freedom," and I'm like, "What?" Because that's not what I don't call that a theme. I don't, especially for the work that we were referring to. I don't think it was, I guess, like bland enough for the theme to be the concept of freedom. That's not what I'm talking about when I'm talking about a theme. So I just wanted to, because we're going to talk probably in future episodes, we're going to come across similar kind of things like that. I wanted to get that out here because I do think that this movie is saying something more
I
specific.
get it. Like, it's kind of like the same. Like, what is the movie trying to like? What is the movie trying to say on like an ultimate level? I guess like ultimately like a conclusion of an essay, like wrapping up like what it's trying to say ultimately about human condition or the world in general. But I guess let's keep pushing forward. What else? Should we talk about the woman Anna de Armas character, or should we get to Harrison Ford's character?
The which character?
Anna
Which
de
woman?
Armas character,
Anna
the woman, the robot, the virtual woman.
Oh, that
She's
was a
pretty important.
fun inclusion. I mean, to be fair, this will go in a while if we go through every single character. If you are more interested in
Yeah.
her, yeah, I think there were a lot, because there were a lot of character. Again, I think every character was what I appreciate about this movie, and I like work that does this in general. I would hope it would be more of a standard, but I do really appreciate this. I think every single character is trying to say something thematically. Like every relevant character is trying to represent something within the wider extended metaphor of the movie, and I really appreciate that because it makes it so looking back on basically every scene is more interesting because every dialogue exchange, every aspect of these characters can be looked at through a double lens of both what is the character actually thinking, what are they feeling, what motivates their action, blah, 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 and why, as in what is the thematic meaning of what they're doing. And I really like that in this movie, basically every character, I think, you could like say that about, with no exceptions. And there's definitely a lot of intrigue there. I will say, before we get into that specific aspect of the movie, which I do think is probably one of the more out there things it goes for, but kind of ahead of its time in that regard conceptually. Just briefly, I will say I really like the plot point of the end of the movie where the actual daughter is the one that was told like that, the one with all like the virtual reality stuff, the one like that
Yeah, I know.
I thought that was like a very natural, like clear, the type of twist where it's like, oh yeah, duh, that make like there's no contradiction there. Like it makes perfect sense given what we were told. I thought that was a very natural.
Disagree a little bit.
Really,
I disagree a little.
I really
Only
like
because
that.
like I liked her as a character. We only had like one scene with her, and like the fact that like she of all people it was a good scene. It was an interesting scene, and I do kind of understand. Looking back on it, the only thing that maybe like got me to like understand that now was like because she cried when she saw that memory and she said it's real, and I guess the idea is that it's real for her, that memory, because that memory was hers. So in that aspect, but as a general, like I don't. The movie's already pretty long, but like if you only one scene in that character is such a major plot point,
No,
like
I don't
it was
mind that at all.
her.
Again, I don't. Well, I think it's
No,
because
no.
okay. I will say
Like
also.
it was her who was the child of replicants all along. Like I felt like they should develop her a little bit
I
more.
don't care
But
because I just think that wasn't the point of the movie. Like thematic. Again, I think the point of the movie was the main character was what was communicating what the movie was trying to say. Like I think that the main, if we're saying like the what is mainly going for thematically, I think that was communicated through the main character. Honestly, part of me thought they weren't even going to show Harrison Ford meeting the daughter. I literally thought the movie was going to end without them showing that. I thought they were just going to stay on Ryan Gosling's character outside, which would have been cool, but I don't mind if they didn't do that. But I literally thought, like, there was a very real possibility where that happened. Maybe it would have been cooler. I don't know. But, like, I think the movie would have functioned completely well just with that happening, just because I really think that what it's mainly talking about pretty much is with regards to that main character, the decisions he is making, kind of his motivation. I think that he is very much so the core of the story, so I don't really mind the tertiary characters kind of having less of a role there, like just in the plot. Because again, I don't.
Well,
The
no, I
plot is
I
made
disagree
to
a little.
communicate like the themes. The plot is basically in every movie. Period. I mean, not well. I think it probably, to an extent, even if some creators, in my opinion, don't really recognize that this is the intrigue of that a story comes from. At least for me, different creators can do what they want. But I think that what Denis Villeneuve is going for here, and the writers of this movie are going for, is that the story is made to communicate the characters in a sense, and the characters are made to act as like the pieces for the themes of the movie. I guess like the stand-ins or as symbols for something else, and that is what's communicating the theme of the movie based on what happens to those, I guess, symbols. And so I don't mind the plot not being, or the literal events of the story not being the focus, because if the story is not being communicated through the plot, like if the idea is not the sole communication of those themes is through the plot, but rather the characters, which the plot is aiding the development of, I just don't mind aspects of the plot not being like super like focused on. I don't care. I don't see how that harms the experience in any way.
I look, I understand. It's just like, and it's like with our last it's like with our last like argument. It's like on like development happening off screen. I don't think it's the exact same case in the exact same thing here at all. Actually, it's just like I understand like your idea is like to focus on the main character and his like whole conflict and all that stuff, and I do understand, and I do think they do a good job. It's just I feel like for a big plot point like that, like a plot point that really guide the story is like, is he a replicant or not? And if not, then there is that girl. There's another girl who it was the daughter, the true like firstborn of replicants. We only got one scene with her, a very very good scene that kind of developed her. And I guess it has enough development to kind of make it. It was still impactful for me. I was surprised and I was kind of very intrigued by that twist. I just felt like maybe just a little bit more development would have been like a little bit useful because it was only one scene. But that's just me personally. I do still think they did a good job as a whole with the
I
story.
say that her character does not really. My interpretation of the wider movie is not based around any aspect of that character's personality. Therefore, I do not care about it that much in the wider scheme of the movie. I think she's interesting in her own right.
Character's personality.
Like, I mean, I don't think that the minutiae of that character's motivations, that character's personality, of her life story, for instance, her design. I don't think any of that is essential to what the movie is saying thematically. Therefore, I do not mind it not being like a major screen time focus.
I
I
guess.
don't think it's necessary in that sense. Again, I think she's interesting in her own way. I think all of the tertiary characters are interesting in that point. But again, if they're not like literally the point, then I don't. Then it's just a
Yeah.
matter of what the creators want to expand on in terms of what's more interesting as a secondary theme.
It's just that my problem. Like, have you watched The Godfather? Like the
I
original
actually
Godfather?
haven't. Maybe that'll be a
Bro,
recommendation in the future. Don't worry about it.
I mean, it's like I don't know. My parents like always brag about how it's the greatest movie of all time, and it's a
Oh
very great
joy.
movie. But I had a very similar issue. Like, I still think it's a very, very great movie as a whole. I do have a similar issue where like a very, very big plot point is like the whole. It's for that movie. It's the climax, but ultimately the culmination of the theme of the story, and not and like a huge plot point of the story. How this character goes through a very, very influential change, and how that change, that singular change guides the story and makes the ultimate transition of what he is at the beginning and compared to what he is at the end very very interesting, and that's ultimately what the story is trying to do.
Yeah, for sure.
It's maybe not the exact same, but like I felt like my problem with with what they did there was that I felt like they didn't have enough development of who that guy was earlier. So like he just showed like I think two scenes at most of who he was earlier before like the ultimate like culmination, the ultimate change kicks in. And he
What
has
do
to
you?
change rapidly. Trust me, I'll get to this point, but like ultimately there wasn't. I just felt like it would have been more interesting if they showed more development to get us to know who that character earlier was, so that when we saw who he is at the end, we can really, really see the true impact of the change. So here, I feel like it's a little bit of the same idea, where once again, a huge plot point for the movie is revealed, and it's about this character that we didn't really get to know that well. If there was a little bit more development on that character, then it would have been a bigger surprise. But that's just me, personally.
Yeah, I just didn't mind that as much.
Yeah, fine. Okay, so moving on, I guess. Okay, Ana de Armas character. I thought it was very interesting what they did with her. Like his own, I guess, like his only real, his attempt to be human is what I kind of got out of it. Like his attempt to like have a human connection is what I had was what I kind of interpreted her as.
Oh, that's not what I saw in that. I
And
saw it as almost the opposite. Interesting. Okay.
really, because she acted like very, very emotional, very, very trying to get him to do fun things, like always trying to get him to open up. So I
I
felt like
thought
there was
that the
that
idea more there was that in the same way that the kind of other woman who like eventually was kind of the
Rachel.
body
Yeah,
kind of
Rachel.
no, I don't mean that. I mean like the blonde woman who was used as like the physical body double for the Joy
Okay.
during that one scene.
Yeah,
I thought in the same line of like, oh, so you don't like real girls. I think that the implication with Joy being this like hologram that literally isn't there and more of an algorithm than any of the human character or even replicant characters are. I thought that the idea there was that um, Ron Gosling's character is really trying to strip down, in a sense, his own agency. In the sense that I think in the beginning of the movie, the state he's in is one where he's trying to lessen the mental burden in his life. In the sense that he's trying to put himself in a situation where he doesn't need to feel like his decisions matter that much. In this sense, he's literally not interacting with a person. He's interacting with someone who doesn't have, or at least like conceptually, or at least he would believe in the beginning of the movie, or before the movie started, you could say, is literally not a person, is like a software. He's
yeah.
putting himself in a situation where he's able to numb himself by having like some loving, like unconditionally helpful kind of companion without the burden of it. And I think that's a really, really powerful way to communicate that, like simply and effectively. And I really liked that as an idea. And I really liked that that character ended up, and I think this is part of what made him kind of change his mind in the end or influenced his actions at the end of the movie, where he still kind of got attached in the sense that he did want to have an impact on her life. And throughout the movie, he tried to have more of one. He tried to make more decisions to give her more agency, to let her see more, to treat her more like a real person. I think that the idea there was over the course of the movie, he realized he did want to have that agency. He did want to feel like more of his own person, and he wanted to break out of that kind of mold he was forced into, where he kind of wasn't supposed to have an emotional reaction to things. He wasn't supposed to kind of get riled up, and he wasn't supposed to make his own choices. And I think throughout this movie, seeing that character kind of make her own decisions as well and have her own autonomy kind of expanded, and himself throughout the movie kind of coming to grips with the fact that he is getting more emotionally attached to this and that he does have more of an impact, feel like that he does feel more about the world around him. I think that is kind of the development that he has throughout the movie, and I think that character is a really conceptually fun and thematically, like whatchamacallit, poignant way of communicating that. Thought it was a really good idea and really well executed. Even also just visually, like we said before, is a really fun concept.
Yeah, I agree with your point. I agree with your overall point, but like does it ultimately match up with mine? Like that kind of human connection, because he's giving her free, because as you said, he's trying to give her free will. He's trying to give her more agency, and doesn't
The
that
story
kind
goes
of
on, yeah.
imply that he's trying to make, huh?
Well, as the story goes on, yeah. No, that's my point. Is that by making those decisions with her and realizing getting more emotionally attached, I think that's how he. Because again, that's why I think the other scene from the movie that I've seen before I saw it was, or at least his part of that scene was when he saw like the rope, like the giant hologram of like the pure
Yeah, yeah,
like
that's like a
sexualized
huge
version
iconic
of her
scene from
where
the
she
movie.
was completely stripped of her like identity, like completely stripped of her autonomy. Like him
Mm,
seeing that, and that originally that's probably what he saw in the first place when he like bought the software or when he subscribed to it. That's probably what he originally wanted. But that growth where at the end of the movie he looks like dejected. It's like he's missing something. It's like there needs to be more there. that kind and him tearing off the band-aid on his face in that scene, literally taking away that kind of emotional cover up that he had before, him exposing himself to that more harsh reality of how he's beyond that at that point. He's beyond that kind of basic instinctual or like just emotionally softening, easy kind of life that he was living before. And he finds it, and it is probably, I think it's a very emotionally resonant and compelling thing that's being communicated where that is like a something obviously that he would like haven't he still feels something for that and it's gone now and he's feeling kind of the grief of that, but he's realizing in that instance that he wants to make his own decisions. He wants that autonomy and he wants that more real life where he makes where his own decisions are being made by seeing that kind of journey that that other character went through and seeing the outcome where that version of her that doesn't have that, the version of her that is just an object for kind of a different person's world. I think that that was a very, I really like that scene looking back on it. I think that was a really poignant way of communicating that.
Yeah, looking back on it, I actually do like you after hearing that. I actually do think that scene's actually pretty good, and like that was kind of honestly the poster of like the main image I always thought of when I thought of
Yeah,
this
same,
movie. Like
exactly.
that was the main image of like the blue, like a blue, like naked lady, like pointing at him, the hologram. I never knew what it fully meant, but like now thinking about it, the fact that like ultimately he sees the like he kind of like rounded back to what he was at the beginning and truly saw just how painful and empty it felt, and how after he's been exposed throughout the movie to this human emotion and in many ways this free will, how painful and empty it feels to just be back at that point of not having that at all. So him kind of shedding that at that point, I do find really, really interesting. So yeah, I think that's a really, really fascinating idea and theme that is really explored in that scene. And yeah, so I guess moving on to the climax and ending of the movie.
The
I
climax,
thought the climax
yeah, I have thoughts on that too.
was interesting. Like I'd say it's better than the last movie's climax. I really didn't like the first movie's climax at all. The crazy stuff on the roof, and like people are jumping around and like squeezing each other and all that stuff. But the climax here is like a whole like space car chase, and it was fun from an action perspective. They're how they're drowning at the same time, and like it's about to be flooding, and overall, like I feel like a genuine like not sure if they're gonna get out okay or everything going on. But yeah, as a whole, the climax was just very very interesting, and the character of what was that replicant that like was kind of an assassin that always fought Ryan Kay's
Yeah, so I
character.
think
What
that
was it?
okay, she was definitely called Love by Wallace. I
Yeah,
thought
she
she
was.
had
Oh
a
yeah, she was
different
called
name.
Love.
I'm gonna Google
Yeah, I
this
think that's
because I
interesting.
thought one of the something I really found interesting. I thought that she had two different names at one point. I'm gonna Google this real quick to make sure. Hold on.
No, I thought was really really interesting about her is like other replicants in the universe in the world, she's forced to be something that she doesn't like that she like is maybe not might not have been if she had free will. Because I remember when she was killing that police officer lady, she was crying at the same time, and I found that really really interesting. It's like almost as if she doesn't want to do this or it's too painful for her to do this.
I thought, yeah, she was an interesting character. I liked her. I thought that there
Yeah,
was, at least how I interpreted it, an aspect of jealousy with that character, with how, like, even in her first scene with him, she says something like, in that kind of, that like data collecting room, that kind of thing, where she like says like, people like share this emotional connection when they ask each other personal questions, and then she asks him a personal question and she kind of rejects him. I thought that that was immediately kind of setting up that conflict and that maybe it was jealousy. I'm still interpreting that character a bit, but there was something fascinating there where there isn't really another equivalent character. Like, well, except for maybe the main character, since again, he probably did feel some aspect of jealousy when he realized that he wasn't the like important, autonomous, like revolutionary that he kind of thought he was gonna be. Like I think both of them maybe
yeah.
felt that sort of dejection that they feel. There's probably a link between that. Yeah, she was an interesting character, 100%. Yeah.
If one part I found interesting was like he had such a big reaction to seeing how he might actually be like I guess a chosen one character type where he's like the first one like born replicant, but he didn't really have that much of a reaction when he was when it was revealed that he wasn't. I guess maybe that's the point. Maybe like
Well, I
there's like
think I
kind of
mean,
the idea of his disappointment being and like coming right. I guess it's the point thematically, like kind of maybe what you said. Like he comes once he realizes he's not that, he comes like roundabout to where he was at the beginning and realizes that he truly does not want to be that way, and that's what kind of convinces him to change a little bit.
well,
That's kind of how I
I mean,
interpreted
I
it.
think also I really looking back on it, the more I think about these scenes, again, it's in a different way than like the original, but I really do like how each scene you can read into the subtext of what these characters are saying and the meaning of it for each character and the meaning thematically for it. Where I like when he like when the lady told him that it was a daughter and he said, wait, wasn't it a son? Like that kind of scene where he realized for himself with the revolutionaries. I like that he doesn't even really get to voice his own emotional reaction. She's the one who says, like that revolutionary woman with the one eye, she's the one who says, oh, don't you think
We all
yeah, we
we
all
all
been
wish
there.
was
Like, oh
true.
yeah,
Yeah.
where like she is kind of taking that autonomy from him too, which is probably shown partially by the fact that she has one eye too, where she's not blind like Wallace is, but she also isn't seeing the world in a sense in
Oh,
the
does it
same
have
way
something?
as him,
Oh,
probably.
does the eye thing have something to do with like one kind of interpretation that says like is like they can tell that they're replicants, well, at least from the old movie, like by the eye because the eye is the key to the soul, and that's why when they
Yeah,
do that
yeah,
whole
yeah,
interview
yeah. Well, yeah,
zooming
it's
on the
also it's
eye,
how
so
they're like
maybe that
identified or something like that. Yeah.
yeah, so like that, then so maybe it's kind of interesting. We don't know the backstory of that character, but she lost an eye for a reason,
Well, yeah, she
so
might have
maybe
probably
that could be.
took it out intentionally. Was I think was part of the which is again fascinating considering how that is like simultaneously a weakness of the replicants, but also like a really important defining feature of them that she willingly removed. And I think that is
Yeah,
telling about how that revolutionary group. Again, I think there is a lot being said here, both like even like politically to an extent, about how that revolutionary group, even they are not, they're not kind of fully like autonomous either. They are still doing things that kind of strip themselves of something they used to have. They're not entirely in that realm themselves. I think there is something fascinating. I think again I think each character has something being said about is being said using them, which I really do respect about this movie, and I really respect any work of media that puts that much attention into each of its minor characters. I like that a lot.
so I guess to wrap up, should we like end on like Harrison Ford's character in this movie?
I was just gonna go straight to the ending, but I mean, I like his character. I think his performance was really good.
It's basically like the ending. It's basically the ending. Like it ends on him mainly.
I mean, well, it ends on the main character.
It ends on,
Like
okay.
specifically.
It does end on both of them, but he's like an integral part that we haven't really talked about. I
I
mean,
guess
like
so.
I
I just don't know many else at him.
yeah, he's interesting. I like how he. It's hard to put my finger on. I think his performance like is like he's been through so much. I always kind of like those people, those types of characters, like in legacy sequels, how they like return back to their roles and like how they aged so much of how they gone through so much different experience and how that experience shapes them and how that experience shapes them in their kind of advice to the newer main character and what's gonna happen to them. So I always kind of find that interesting with legacy sequels, the ones that do a legacy sequel right. Um, and I will say the one dumb thing I kind of found in the movie, the one thing that kind of annoyed me a little bit was the whole like fight between Harrison Ford and Ryan Gosling's character with the whole Elvis backgrounds.
I liked that
That
a
was a
lot.
little
I
bit
thought that scene was
that was
really
a little bit too much
interesting.
for me.
I'm
I just
still
didn't
very
understand I
very
just
liked
didn't
it.
understand the point of it. I was like, okay, and
I
then
mean,
they
I
just
think it was
stopped and they're
both
like, okay, let's have
interesting
a drink.
visually, and also I like. There's probably a lot. Again, I think that I'm trying. I haven't thought too much about. Frankly, that whole part of the movie with Harrison Ford's character, weirdly enough, was probably the part I was the least engaged in, and I'm not sure why. Maybe because a lot of it was like, again, apart from that specific decision being made with regards to that scene and just the inclusion of that kind of Elvis, that music interspersing and it bugging that whole. Apart from that visually, I thought most of that, a big part of that movie was like pure action, or at least a lot of it. And again, it's just I like a lot of the dialogue scenes. I like a lot of the character work, and so when that's not as much of the focus, inevitably my interest dips. So, but I want to think more on what the purpose of that was. But again, whenever there's a choice being made, it clearly different, and I'm aware that the directors are making very intentional decisions with regards to what they're trying to portray. I'm gonna think more on it when I can recognize that. So yeah, I'm curious about that.
Matt's audio cut out here. We've solved the issue since this episode, but the audio from this part of the discussion has been lost to the abyss.
Yeah, to wrap up our opinions on the movie, Yeah, I really liked it. I thought it was really, really interesting, like a fascinating expansion of the world that the first Blade Runner like created, and it just like expanded on so many different themes and core ideas and core concepts, and it like expanded the world in many different unique ways that I didn't expect it. And also, it's made by Denis Villeneuve, one of my favorite directors working right now, and he's just hasn't made a bad movie I think I've seen. So, and his visual style is so unique, and having his visual style be applied to a world like Blade Runner is really, really a great experience. So, as I would say, I still have things I'm a little bit not sure about and themes that I still am a little bit iffy on, just the way they were communicated. But as a whole, I would say this movie's pretty great. So, I think I would give it an either 8 or 8.5 out of 10. Maybe not a 9 because there's still things I'm like sketchy on, but um for now an 8. Let's see what you have. If you
Yeah, I'm also gonna give it an 8. It is closer to a 9 than to a 7, and it is.
so you
I
liked it
think
more so
my
you liked it more than the last one.
maybe I'm still again. It's weird just because my emotional experience was definitely more vivid with this movie than it was for the original because I saw the fuck ass theatrical cut first for the original. So obviously I'm not gonna get that as immersed in it when I saw that piece of shit first. But it was definitely I need to think about which I like more, and I need to think about both movies more. But I could maybe I would drop my rating for the first movie after I think about it more, or maybe the opposite. I would drop this. I need to think about it. They're both 8 range. They're definitely I'm around there. Very interesting, intentional with what it's doing with its characters, with what it's trying to portray. A lot of great scenes in isolation. A lot of great, interesting concepts being played with. I really like it. I'm gonna definitely think about both of these movies more and try to solidify my feelings and also just wider interpretation on both of them. They're both
So
cool.
as a duology, I guess.
It's great. It's a great
Yeah,
duology. I like it.
pretty good. Yeah, I'd give it a solid 7.5 as a
I'm
duology, I
not
guess.
interested in rating it as a duology. I don't, they were made over 30 years apart. I don't care. But as movies, they're
Oh,
both
cool.
fun. I like
Yeah,
them.
those
Like
movies
them
are
both.
both really good. So next time we mentioned this
Okay.
last
Well, no.
time, but next time
So
we're
just
gonna
to
be watching.
Well, no, hold on. So just
Wait,
to preface how this is gonna work, each episode at the end, one of us will alternate. We'll give a recommendation. So in addition to some other movie that we just watched on our own time, because we do that, where each one of us will recommend a movie for both of us to watch before the next podcast that we will discuss. And so Matt is gonna start us off here with his recommendation. So what are you thinking?
uh, my recommendation is another Denis Villeneuve movie. I think one of the ones that really started putting him on the map. That really made him kind of stand out. Not as much as like on a big screen that Blade Runner 2049 did, but on the smaller screen. It has a great cast and a really, really compelling story. It's called Prisoners. It's one of the darkest movies I've seen in a while, and it's very, very compelling, very, very interesting, and has some very, very dark elements that I think Kai will really like. So yeah, and also just I think Kai in general, you'll really find Denis Villeneuve's filmography very, very interesting. And I think this is a really great movie to go off of. So yeah,
Okay,
and
funky.
then should we mention Superman?
So yeah, next
So
time we will also go over Superman. We both have seen it
James
already.
Gunn's Superman. James
James
Gunn's
Gunn
Superman.
specifically. That will be something that also probably gonna disagree on that one more than we have, or maybe even these. Probably, I'm curious as to how that one's gonna go. So,
I isn't usually the superhero loving
I'm
type. I
not.
kind of am.
Yeah, so that'll be
And
a goofy discrepancy. See how that goes.
yeah, because he doesn't believe the MCU can do well,
I'm
but
a
I
hater.
disagree.
They're all
Yeah,
bad,
and
every single one of them. But
he chooses to he chooses to like anime instead. Well, what? Oh,
yeah,
wow,
sorry, I like
shame on
peak.
him.
That's my bad. But okay,
Peak. Yeah, ouch,
we'll
peak.
get into
I
that
hate that.
later.
All
But
right, all right, we'll
all
get into
right,
that later.
fun
Marvel versus
times.
anime episode. That could be fun.
That would be like 10 hours long. We'll get okay. But
Oh
all
my
right.
god.
Anyway,
All right,
fun
all right.
times. Oh,
Yep.